I don't know about you guys, but this is going to be the biggest political event of the year. And obviously, it's very sad that this is all happening because of Charlie Kirk's assassination. It looks like we are moving closer to getting answers. And I find all of this in the general sense very interesting because Michael F., he did a video and he had posted on Twitter talking about Candace and her husband and everything like that. And just like the responsibility of a man in a public situation like this where a woman is getting a bunch of hatred and all of that. And so basically what he pointed out was like, hey, Candace, you might be a good investigator. You might think that you are getting answers and all of that stuff, but you're never going to actually figure out who did it. And that's very interesting when you think about JFK, MLK, RFK, and all of them, and you think about what was the public's reaction when all of that was happening. Were they reacting the way that we are today, or were they just kind of like in shock and they didn't know what questions to ask? They didn't know how to react? Did they just believe everything that the government told them? What was it like? Because if they reacted the way that we are now and it took them 60 years to get answers, that's pretty crazy. And it shows you, if that is the case, that we really haven't evolved any, especially if we think that because we have better technology, more technology than what they had in the 50s and the 60s, and we're not any closer to getting answers. That's pretty crazy when you think about it like that. Now, I really think that Candace Owens sitting down with Turning Point USA is going to be the biggest event of the year. I know that right now it's not going to happen because they really want her to be there in person, which is really crazy. You can obviously do that remotely. She doesn't need to be there in person unless you want her to feel the tension in the atmosphere. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I do find it interesting that they are unwilling to let this happen remotely because we live in a time where everything is online. You don't have to do anything in person anymore. You don't have to travel to a studio to film and to do all of that stuff. You can really just hop on a computer and have a meeting with someone halfway across the world. Now, I had a good laugh because Turning Point USA, they were like, hey, we're going to have a formal response. We're going to sit down. We're going to do a live stream. Candace is welcome to join us and all of that stuff. And it's really funny when you think about the fact that they're like casually kind of inviting her to it. But if we're being realistic and honest, booking Candace to come on the Charlie Kirk show in 2025 after Charlie Kirk's assassination is going to be a huge deal, especially when you consider all of the tension leading up to this moment. And like I said on Twitter, this is definitely the main event of WrestleMania. They've been building up to this day after day, week after week, and month after month. And so this is a huge deal, and we have no idea what will even have occurred by the time 12/15 rolls around. So this is definitely crazy times for sure. Now let's get into Turning Point's response to Candace Owens. They had Blake Neff come on and give basically, I think a 7-minute statement. I did not watch the full episode. I saw that they clipped maybe that portion of him responding to Candace, and that was pretty much all I saw. So we can go ahead and play a clip that I have from those 7 minutes.
She has called it suspicious that Mikey's wife, who works at Turning Point, helped plan the campus tour event where Charlie was murdered, which she didn't, by the way. She doesn't work on campus events. Candace has suggested the Utah Valley University event was unusual and its details suggested a, quote, inside job. She has claimed that foreign aircraft have followed Erica Kirk around the country and that Turning Point has lied about this happening. She has accused us of lying about Charlie wanting Erica to take over for him if he died. She has suggested Charlie's security team intentionally denied him first aid after the shooting to ensure that he died. She has raised suspicions about the head of our technical team because he took an SD card out of a camera.
So there he's basically just reading out the different claims that Candace has made over basically the past 3 months. And this is not really helpful because if you've even been just watching social media, you don't have to watch Candace's episodes in full, but you should have way more understanding of what her claims are if you're going to come out and make a casual statement like this. Because what kind of annoyed me a little bit about this reading is that there's not any context. It's just you reading kind of like straightforward kind of details or like a straightforward summary of what she said, but it's missing a lot of context to where it sounds crazy because you don't understand the full story. So if you heard a little bit more detailed about what she's saying and why she's saying it, you would perceive her claims differently, in my opinion. And what I found interesting about this is that this really reads like an opening statement in a trial, but there should be the understanding that we're way past that. Like, you are on the witness stand, giving your testimony at this point, being interrogated by both your lawyers and then the lawyers of the opposing side, right? We're way past opening statements, and so they should have really hit back with a much different response if they were finally going to respond to Candace. And I feel like they should have just paid someone to sit down and watch everything that Candace was saying about Charlie Kirk, about Turning Point USA, about anybody working for Turning Point USA, and give them like a written summary of the major points, what counterclaims they can make, and all of that stuff. Like, all of that should have been done before you guys recorded this episode and gave kind of like this pointless response to Candace Owens, because again, by now most of America knows that Candace is saying some pretty crazy, some pretty wild stuff about Turning Point USA, about Charlie Kirk, and all of that stuff. And depending on where you are in terms of how woke you are in the traditional sense of understanding that there's kind of like this whole other side of the world that we don't really understand in terms of things that go on in the shadows and all of that stuff, right? And so if you aren't open to that, or if you are intentionally blind to that, then yeah, all of this is going to sound crazy to you. But if you are even just a little bit curious or interested in it, it doesn't seem as crazy. Now, Candace responded to a lot of this point for point on her show yesterday, so I'm not really going to get into that too much, but I do want to acknowledge that they had Blake Neff read the statement when they very easily could have had Erica Kirk read the statement, and I think that that would have been more impactful, because people have been begging Candace to say something about Erica Kirk, and they've also been wondering kind of why Erica has been silent, and then other people have been saying, well, she doesn't need to dignify Candace Owens with a response, right? She doesn't need to address the allegations because it's beneath her. And so I do think that they probably said, hey, this is not going to be a good look for you, Erica, if you read this. Either she didn't want to do it, or they just really didn't consider that. I do think that that would have sent a completely different message, but they would have had to definitely change their statement to make it more impactful. So I looked at the comment section of Blake's post and his video on this whole situation of responding to Candace Owens, and obviously some people hate what Candace is doing. They feel bad for Turning Point USA. They're glad that they finally responded in this way, and so they're commenting and saying, hey, I'm sorry that you have to deal with this while you're grieving, and this horrible, and she's evil, and all of that stuff. And it's so crazy because it doesn't seem genuine. It doesn't seem real. It seems fake, because there's no way that you can hear all of the allegations and kind of deny every single thing that's happening, right? Like, that's not realistic. You understand, like, hey, that seems plausible. Okay, let me keep my eyes and my ears on that one. Oh no, that sounds crazy. I'm not going to believe that. There shouldn't be anyone who completely flat out denies everything without even hearing every single thing that Candace has said, or hearing the details to understand why Candace is making whatever claims she's making in the first place. And so I just find that interesting as well. Now, getting back to Turning Point's response, so they wanted to set up a live stream. They wanted to basically have Charlie's family and friends respond, and they wanted to do it in person in Arizona, and they invited Candace to be a part of that, meaning she has to go to Phoenix, Arizona. And this is obviously going to be complicated because Candace Owens did just reveal that she is being targeted by France, by whoever, and basically there's an assassination plot against her, and so that would make you afraid to travel. You need to hire extra security and all of that stuff. It's understandable why anybody would be suspicious or concerned about traveling to the physical location of the organization that they're beefing with, right? Like, what do you actually expect to happen? If you really wanted to hash this out, you would actually do it someplace neutral, to where you both feel a little bit on edge, a little bit off guard, but you know that no one really has the upper hand because it truly is a neutral place. Moving on, I want to get into Candace Owens. So she responded on her show. She went point for point and kind of in a very quick way addressed what they said what was wrong, clarified what she actually said. that sort of thing. So we're not going to get into any of that. But she has this thing where she is very witty and she gives good comeback, and she ends a portion of her video where she's basically going off on them, criticizing what they're doing, explaining her positions and all of that. And so we'll just go ahead and play the clip on her parting shot.
Have you no shame? We're going to find out. You can pick the place. You can pick the time. I say we do it tomorrow. We don't need to plan for this. We don't need lawyers in between us, lawyer statements. It's not how I roll, okay? I don't care about any of that. I want it to be authentic. Like I said, you can take the money. We can raise money live for this conversation. That is how badly the world is demanding it. So I accept it with whistles and bells, everything I fully accept. I say, let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it tomorrow. And my only ground rule is no assassinations. Okay? No assassinations, no funny business. You can't pretend you're going to do it and then Candace died in a mysterious accident. Okay? We'll be right back after a quick break.
Okay, so obviously that was a very good dig that she got in there, because obviously that is the entire point of the claims that she's making and all of that stuff, right? But she's really good at kind of hitting you where it hurts and just annoying you, because I know that she has the lawsuit going on with the Macron, and she's still putting up that picture of E.T. in a wig and all of that stuff, and so she's just having her fun, but at the same time she is really serious about what she's looking into and the information that she's sharing and the answers that she is wanting. Now, there's a few things that she mentioned, and first she talked about, one, raising money, we can basically donate it or whatever, and so I don't really know what that means, because obviously you're gonna get money from doing this episode that you guys would have been doing together, so I don't know if she's talking about that or if she's talking about like the super chats that they get through the stream or whatever, and so I don't really understand what she means by raising money during the event that they're obviously not going to have at this point, and so that's super interesting. Then she also talked about how they could do it tomorrow, so that would have been today, which is Thursday, December 4th, and it's really good that she gave that response on her show, showing, hey, we can have this conversation anytime, any place. I'm prepared to have this conversation. She doesn't need to spend time researching and all of that stuff, right? Because what this made me think of in terms of like how the date is pushed back to 12/15, because Allie Beth Stuckey, she did a video and she was talking about preparing for the Jubilee and just like taking her notes and kind of trying to figure out from Charlie Kirk what it would be like and all of that stuff, right? And so obviously that's what Turning Point seems like they are wanting to do, or they should be doing it, to prep for possibly debating somebody on the 15th, right? Or at least defending themselves and answering the allegations and the claims against them, right? And so that is super interesting, but at this point you should have already done all of that, especially since it's been 3 months, right? You should have paid someone to watch the videos if you yourself weren't going to watch it, and make sure they gave you really good notes so that you could counter everything that Candace has been saying and any potential bombs that she may throw your way because she hadn't made that information public yet. Now, after Candace responded on her show, Blake Neff went on Twitter and he posted around 1:21 a.m. and basically said, hey, this is the date that we're doing it, 12:15, 2 p.m. You need to be there in person, and this is what we're doing, and you need to respond by 4 p.m. I think that same day. And so obviously that's problematic because the timer is literally running overnight and she's losing time, right? And so she was saying on her show today, and then she obviously posted on Twitter in the morning, and she was basically saying that she didn't know about this, someone told her about it, and then she responded on Twitter, right? So you would think that they would have a conversation if they were really serious behind the scenes about setting something up and making sure that both people can actually attend. And again, it doesn't really need to be in person. This could all be done remotely. Now, there's one argument that I've been seeing people make, and they've been saying, well, you know, this deadline isn't really fair. Candace is a mom. She has a family. She can't travel, all of that stuff. And I don't think that her being a mom and her having kids is a relevant issue at this point. Like, she is obviously dedicated to investigating what happened to Charlie Kirk, investigating Turning Point USA and all of that stuff. And so if someone gives her a deadline deadline or extend something her way, she really cannot use her family as an excuse, and I don't think other people should use her family as an excuse either. If she is serious about truly debating Turning Point USA, she needs to be able to make that work regardless of what it is. And so I don't think she needs to travel to them, because again, that's just ridiculous. You are literally beefing with this organization, so why would you go on your turf when you really don't know what's going to happen, right? Because you don't know how hostile it's going to be. And then obviously she does talk about how people are planning to kill her and all of that stuff. And so either way, it's going to be difficult and scary for her to travel just because of those threats against her life. And the other argument that I think people would be making about this is that basically by them making this announcement in the middle of the night, basically not really giving her a whole lot of time to respond, and then also wanting it to be in person, I think that a lot of people will say, well, you know, she wasn't nice to us, she didn't give us any decency or respect, so why do we have to extend that to her with this invite? And I don't necessarily think it's about what Candace is doing, because whatever Candace does, that doesn't mean that you have to act that same way if you perceive what she's doing to be wrong, right? So if you truly want to have a sit down with her, you would make sure that she understands the information, you have an open line of communication, and you can actually make sure that you both are in agreement, so that if one person doesn't show up or whatever, you can say, hey, see, we had this conversation and she didn't show up. Because right now there is that conversation happening online, but people are totally just lying about it or just not even informed about what is going on. And so more so the issue with the way that this was planned or announced to the public when this event was going to happen on 12/15 is more so about the fact that it seems like it's not a sincere offer, because really it's about Turning Point being able to respond, and it really sounds like they just want to read victim impact statement and just have Candace sit there and listen to it, right? It's not probably going to be a debate like we're thinking, where they're exchanging not necessarily ideas, but they're able to go back and forth and argue against the claims that Candace was making and all of that stuff, right? Now let's get into the psychop on social media. So a lot of people have crazy responses to this whole situation. There's people who have been screenshotting what Candace has said, but they'll have a different description of what she said or the takeaway from what she said, and it's really crazy to see that in real time, because you understand that people are either lying or they're just not informed and they have no idea what they're talking about, and they hope that you don't know what's going on, so you'll just believe whatever they say. And so it's really crazy, because I saw one where it was like, oh, see, Candace is backing out, and it was Candace saying, hey, you know, I didn't know about this, why did you pick it at this time, this place, this is during my show, but I'll cancel my show and send me the link basically, and we can do it at that time that day, right? And so if you don't read all of the information, you're just going to believe that person who is saying Candace is backing out, right? And so you see that a lot where people are only telling half of the story, and if you're not paying attention or you don't already know what's going on, you're going to easily fall for that. And it's really scary when you understand how frequently this happens, and I notice it more so because I'm covering a lot of political and pop culture events, but if I was not already doing this, I wouldn't necessarily be clocking things the way that I am. And so that's really scary for the average person who's watching these videos and it's kind of just going in one ear and out the other, and they're not really paying attention, or other people who have no idea what's going on. They're hearing things secondhand, or they're hearing things from their friends who are already kind of inputting their opinions and their feelings into how they communicate that information to someone else, right? And so that's been the wildest part, just to see the varying and different reactions on social media. The one thing that really bugs me is the whole just asking questions thing. I know that Candace says that a lot, but there's been like this effort to counter that by asking ridiculous questions. Like people will say, hey, you know, I think Candace killed Charlie Kirk. I'm just asking questions, right? And so that's not how that works. You don't ask dumb questions. You ask legitimate questions that are going to actually accomplish something or give you a real answer so that you can move forward in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, right? It doesn't really help to ask stupid questions that you can easily find the answer to, because the whole point of just asking questions is to get clarity and to access information that you don't already have or that you can't easily find, right? And so it's just been super interesting to see people try to spin that and try to be cute cute and clever, and it's like, no, you're just showing that you have no idea what's going on. Because I saw one post where a girl was like, hey, Candace is selling her CIA mugs, she's selling her we don't know, no, but we know t-shirts and whatever, her merch, right? And people are like, no, she's been selling that since becoming Brigitte and all of that stuff, right? And so it just really shows you how people don't know what's going on, and then they're listening to people who are either giving them the wrong information or they have no idea what's going on as well. Now, in terms of this event on 12/17, if it was going to actually happen with Candace being able to remote in and basically appear on a video chat while they are at the turning point location, they really do need a moderator, because I have no idea how this is going to go. With it being on Turning Point's turf, you would assume that they would host the event, they would be driving it and leading it, and how is Candace going to participate in that? Does she get to speak and butt in whatever she wants? Does she have to be quiet? Does she have to wait to a certain turn? Whatever, right? And so they really do need a moderator, but I don't know who is going to be neutral enough to sit in on this event, listen to both sides who hadn't already weighed in and really heavily taken one side over the other. I think a lot of people have opinions on this, and so you're not really going to be able to find someone who is completely neutral. So yeah, I have no idea who should moderate if this were to happen. And the other thing around her not being able to remote in, this is pretty wild, because the advantage of having someone remote in is that you can just cut their feed if you don't like what they're saying, right? You can just take them off the air and continue your thing. But then that's obvious when you're doing that, because you're trying to silence someone and make sure that they can't tell their story, their side, whatever, right? And so what that made me think of was the JD Vance interview, where I can't recall who he's talking to, but he was asking him a question, and he asked a question several times, and JD answered a few times, and then he asked one last time, and then JD was trying to kind of push back on what was being said, and then the guy was like, okay, we're done, basically, and they took him out of the picture, they took him off the view and all of that stuff, right? And so that's the one advantage that you have when you're doing a video call. You can just cut their feed and continue doing your thing. But when you're in person and if it gets heated and you're like, okay, this is done, you can shut off the whole stream and then nobody's doing the video, right? The show is done. But that is also obvious too, because people are going to want to know what's going on behind the scenes when the cameras go off, right? And so even that would be crazy, because say Candace did go in person, what is the backstage footage like? What is the conversation like leading up to when you guys turn the cameras on? What is it like when you turn the cameras off? Is it a completely different dynamic? Are you guys all friendly before the cameras come on, and then you guys are hostile and angry in front of the cameras? What does that look like, right? And so there's a lot of questions, and it's just super interesting to understand kind of what are the advantages of Candace remoting in, and then what are the advantages of doing it in person? Because I feel like with them wanting her to be in person, it's really about, hey, you're on our turf, you have to answer to us, and they get to have that role as the host and really drive the interaction versus them going to Candace or going somewhere neutral. And I would assume that the Charlie Kirk show happens at their Turning Point USA campus, so she would have to face all of their employees, I would assume, going into that studio to film and record, right? And so that's another intimidation factor when you have to look at everybody in the eyes, look at them in the face, and see how they're affected by what you're doing. And I would imagine that that would be the intent, to make her have to look at everybody in the eye and see how she's affecting them and maybe change her stance. But if she doesn't feel that pressure, then she's never going to have that opportunity, right? And so I think that also ties into why they want her to be in person and all of that stuff, versus her being able to just remote in and not really have to deal with all of that. Moving on, Charlie Kirk's legacy. So a lot of people are arguing that Candace is ruining Charlie Kirk's legacy, and one thing I haven't heard people argue is, how would Charlie Kirk feel right now if he was in Candace Owens' shoes, where he's finding out all of this stuff about his company, about other people? Would he be able to look at his organization the same way? What changes would he make if he were in Candace's shoes and he had the information that she has, right? And then also with him being alive and seeing all of this happening to his organization, how hurtful and how painful would that be? Because you spent your whole life building up this organization, you gave your life to it, your time to it, right? And then you see it kind of dwindle down into this kind of organization that doesn't have the same power that it used to have, right? And so I think that would be even worse, because maybe Charlie Kirk was starting to find out some information, but he didn't see this. He doesn't have to see this and see how bad or how worse it could actually get than whatever he knew in his last moments, right? And so I think that's pretty crazy, because I was watching The Beast in Me, and it's a TV show on Netflix, and basically this guy is the lead character. He's crazy. He's killed a bunch of people. His dad knows that he's crooked, and he has his brother, which is the guy's uncle, watching him. The dad finds out that the son did something. It's an older man, but the dad finds out that the son did something, and then he has a stroke or a heart attack or something like that, and he's in the hospital. And his brother, the uncle, he kills his brother to prevent him from seeing how the son ruined his legacy, right? And so the point was, he didn't want his brother to see how his son had ruined everything, because the guy ends up going to jail. So sorry for the spoiler for The Beast in Me, but anyway, so that is the alternative. Would Charlie Kirk want to actually see what has become of his organization, what has become of Candace, what has become of the world since his assassination, right? That's pretty crazy, and I don't really see people talking about that as much. They more so frame it as if Charlie would, I guess, kind of be fighting back against Candace Owens, and you don't hear people talking about how maybe he could be on her side and wanting to root out the corruption and all of that stuff, because I think it goes beyond Turning Point. You're always going to have people in the shadows doing crazy stuff, manipulating people and all of that stuff, right? And I would like to think that Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens would be on the same side fighting that instead of fighting each other. And so just to really tie it together, the pushback that Charlie Kirk got over not debating Nick Fuentes, I imagine that it would feel 1,000 times worse if he were to see everything that has become a Turning Point since his assassination. Alrighty, so to wrap up this video, that's everything that I wanted to talk about. Really glad that we could come on and break down all of these different angles to this whole Candace Owens versus Turning Point USA. Not sure what is going to happen on December 15th, but hopefully we do get more answers. We are able to learn more information and really kind of close the loop on everything that is happening here as it relates to the Charlie Kirk murder investigation, and then also anything going on with Turning Point USA, because I know that their finances are being talked about, their taxes and all of that stuff. And so let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.